Okay, so I wanted us to start with, we didn't get a whole lot of chance to talk about what the Bible has to say about all of this. So I want to start off with hopefully a very famous passage, and this is Galatians chapter 3. So in Galatians 3, 26 through 29, it says this. It says, "So, in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." And this is a beautiful passage that we talk about, I think, a lot, to say that, like, we're all the same. Like, in Jesus, there is not preference. It doesn't matter if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're poor. It doesn't even matter if you're a slave. Like, this was a big, when Paul said this rocked the world right there. Like, this was a big hit to slavery, to say that in Jesus, a slave or an owner is not better than their slave. Like, that was a really big deal. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish. It doesn't matter if you're a Gentile, if you're a man, if you're a woman. Like, all of those things were huge in that culture. And to say that none of that matters, we're all the same in Jesus, is beautiful. And my guess is you guys all agree with this. My guess is to say, like, of course, like, I don't think any less of someone who's black. I don't think any less of someone who's a woman, of someone who is, has less money than me. But the challenge is, this is not the way that people experience life right now. The challenge is, it doesn't seem like everybody's the same. The challenge is the police don't treat everybody the same. The law doesn't treat everybody the same. The school systems don't treat everybody the same. Like, our society doesn't treat everybody the same. So how do we take this and compare it to our life? And maybe even more so, and that's what I want to talk about today. How do we take this and compare it to the way that I live? Do I actually live this way? I might think this way, but do I live this way? So again, we talked about some of the differences on Wednesday, right? Like Nathan was talking about the fact that, like, as a black man, when he gets pulled over by the police, he's not afraid of a ticket. He's afraid of for his life. Like, and he should be. Like, if you look at the numbers, the odds that a police officer, that he might say the wrong thing and that he could be shot, the odds are way higher if your skin is black. Like, the fear, or at least the reality of, he knows when he comes to our church, or any church, or Claremont High School, he's going to be just about the only black face in the crowd. Aware that always, like, in the back of his mind, if he doesn't get a job, if he isn't, if he asks a girl to prom and she says no, in the back of his mind has to be, is it because of the color of my skin? Whereas I don't think we ever think that. I have never gone to an interview for a job and they didn't hire me and I said, is it because my skin is white? I've never thought that. And that's what's so different about this compared to our world. So, what I need us to wrestle with this week, and this is where it's going to be tough, is that we were talking about the systems, and the systems are easy because the systems are they're not even a they, they're an it. Like, I can talk about the system being broken, and it kind of gets us all off the hook in a certain way because it's not about me as the individual. But the challenge is, what about me, the individual? And it's that interesting thing that I've heard a lot, and I've probably said a lot, especially over this last month, is that nobody calls themselves a racist. The word racist is such a extreme word that I think, like, when we think of racists, I think we're thinking about, like, the KKK. We're thinking about, like the people that have, like, the Confederate flags and the gun racks and the stuff like that. We're thinking about, like, skinheads and neo-Nazis and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, that is also a problem. Like, I looked on the internet this week, and they said there are 940 known hate groups in the United States, and the vast majority of them are anti-black. There are 88 known hate groups in California today. Like, that is very much an issue. But the reality, and even if we don't want to use the word racist, if I don't want to say, hey, I'm a racist, I want to deal with that, if we don't want to use that word, I think we have to realize there are three things that we do wrestle with, or that we have. The first one was something that Kennedy's dad talked about last week, and it's this idea of ignorance or blind spots. There are certain things that people experience that I have no knowledge of. A big thing that I know a lot of people are talking about this week is Juneteenth. Juneteenth was a holiday, or at least a commemorance that came up this last week that commemorates the end of slavery, when the last slave was set free. A lot of us didn't even know that date existed, that was a thing. Talking about civil rights activists, like how many of us don't even know who that person is? Again, the experience that black people have in the United States, or in Claremont, how many of us don't know? That's just blind spots, ignorance. Second one, which is a challenge, especially for middle school, is apathy. I just don't care. This doesn't affect me and my life, and if I'm honest, I just don't care. And that's a challenge that we need to talk about. And the third one is the one that I want to focus on right now, is called implicit bias. And that's come up a lot recently. That's kind of a buzzword, like systemic racism and implicit bias are kind of two big words that have come up. And what implicit bias is it's basically the unconscious associations that our brain makes, where we see a pattern and we connect those, and that's just the way that our brain works. But there are certain things that are implicit, or that are subconscious, that are going on inside there that can lead to some of these problems. So I actually Judy found a video for us, so we're going to watch that to kind of talk about implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias? Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes those shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times, when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We'd never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an over-representation of black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race, and exploring ways we might combat the problem. One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
So the interesting thing about implicit bias is that it's not about value judgments. It's not about this thing is better than this thing, or even it's not even about saying like this is like because of this association this person is bad or anything like that. It's just literally about the connections that our brain has made because of the things that we've been exposed to. And I was thinking about like even just in our culture, in media and in television, the images that we see associated with different cultures. Like I was thinking about superheroes. Like if we really think about black superheroes, I was thinking about it this week. I can think of two. I can think of Miles Morales, Spider-Man, like in Spider-Verse, who is a very new character, by the way. Technically not like having a black Barbie feels a little different because Barbie is this staple that we have seen again and again and again. Uh-oh. Hang on. Oh, okay. Sorry, it gave me an error message. Okay. Oh, where were we? Anyway, Barbie and et cetera, et cetera. The other one that I was thinking about is that think about like black music, right? Where we associate like rap. And don't get me wrong, obviously the vast majority of rappers are black, but what are the associations that we connect with rap music? A lot of times we think of like gangsta rap, and we think about violence, and we think about advocating violence, and songs like there's a song called F the Police. Like that's probably the rap song that a lot of people think about, even though that's only one song out of who knows how many songs that have been recorded. Think about gangs. Like that's a huge one. Is that I think an association that we have in our mind is black, because we've created this image of what gangs are. Even though I did the research, and it said that of the gangs in the United States, which again they don't actually call hate groups gangs, which I think is kind of shady that they don't. So if you're in the KKK or if you're in a skinhead gang or something like that, technically you're not in a gang, you're in a hate group, I guess. So not including those, there are 14% of gangs that are white, 35% that are black, and 44% of gangs are Hispanic. But we associate black people with gangs much more often than we do Hispanic or white. Another one that I was thinking about is I watch a lot of movies, and it's like in horror movies or even in action movies, it's a cliche. It's even joked about. Is that in almost every horror or action movie there is one black guy, and you know he's gonna die fairly early on. He's gonna be a big macho guy that's gonna like try and punch the monster or whatever, and then he's gonna die. Like, and that's you watch horror movies, and you see it so often that it creates this image in our head. To have a black guy who is like the love interest, or to have a black guy that's like very touchy-feely, or that's very like, oh, I'm scared of the monster, that doesn't fit. Like, no, the black guy has got to be this big, strong, like whatever, and it creates those associations in our brain. So, what do we do about all of that? And that's the challenge. I mean, so and that's where I said the first thing that I think of, what do we do with all of this, is that I think we have to acknowledge that this is out there. Again, those three issues that I talked about, that we can not know, we can be ignorant to certain things, have those blind spots, we can not care, we can be apathetic, and we can have these implicit subconscious biases that are in there. Like, we all love to say nobody's perfect, right? But we also really love to say, but I'm not a racist, because that's such a scary term. So it's, instead of that, if we focus on those three things and go like, and that to really dig in here and to realize that, no, you know what? There is area in all three of those things that needs dealing with. So what do we do? And this is four things that our church is focusing on right now. And it's this idea of listening, learning, lamenting, and laboring. They're 4 L's that I'm sure we didn't come up with, but somebody found it somewhere. So the first one, listen. How do we listen? And for me, I think this is such an important, hopefully we've started this process already, but it is such an important step, because it's about listening to the stories of the people who are crying out right now. trying to shift those associations that we have already built up into our brain. Because I think the challenge is if I'm just going to Google search whatever I want to Google search, or if I'm going to go to TikTok or to YouTube, I'm going to watch the stuff that reinforce my associations. How do I listen to the opposite stuff? How do I listen to the people that are crying out? Is that there's a lot of great interviews that are out there, and not just the flashy ones, but I remember there was a movie actually where it said heart that's actually going to love, that's going to be empathetic. Watch a movie about racial tension. And they might not be, I mean, I don't know what kind of movies you guys watch. I don't know if you guys watch like more like high-flying action movies, if you feel like, oh, I've got such a short attention span, I can only play. Like, it's kind of important to open our mind to the stuff that we need to hear. So like 3 movies I was thinking of is Hidden Figures, about the NASA scientists, Just Mercy, and if you have Disney Plus, there's one called Queen of Katwe, about a chess playing champion, actually. And those are great, easy ones to kind of get the ball rolling and just to start this conversation inside your own brain. So then the second one is about learn. How do we learn about these things? And it's the interesting thing that I've heard a bunch is that of black people kind of being at least frustrated with how people are like, what? Like, what's going on? Like, where did this come from? Like, systematic racism. And they're like, seriously? Like, we've been talking about this since the 60s, and y'all are just paying attention to it now. So rather than, and don't get me wrong, we've got some amazing people in our church, and like Nathan has said, like, he is definitely open to questions and to talking. Judy has said the same thing. But like, it's up to us to take some initiative. Like, actually do some research. Like, Google search some of this info and really, like, read it. Like, you can go, there's a couple of websites that, and I mean, it's tough to look at, but that track the number of hate groups in the United States. And to look at that, and to not shy away and make sure, pretend that it's going to go away. Like, actually look the number of police shootings. Like, how many unarmed black men have been shot by the police? Like the protests, what's actually, again, and that's the thing that struck me, is that some of our early conversations, it kind of sounded like some of us feel like there's only a couple of protests and they're all violent. And that goes away when you start doing some research, when you start looking again. There's a list of literally every protest, and there's a bunch of them that have been missed, but all the protests that are happening around the world, and you can look at all of those. And then like social justice websites that just have all of these resources. Like, you can definitely do that to learn, to educate yourselves. And then the other one, if you're bold enough, and I might recommend doing this with your family, there's some very challenging documentaries on race, especially on Netflix and on Hulu. You could watch one of those. Like, we watched 13th, which is about the 13th Amendment ending slavery, but about the prison systems. And it was tough. Like, there was a lot of harsh reality in there. There's a lot of, like, you're interviewing inmates. There's going to be some swear words. There's going to be stuff like that. But it's like, because it's a documentary. It's not, whatever, like, fluff piece. It's trying to be really biting about this actual issue. And then the third one, and this is maybe the most, I mean, they're all important. This is such an important one, and this is lament. And lament, grieving, feeling the sadness, it's really, for us, it's about caring. And to be honest, like, this is not always an easy one. How do I care about someone who is not me? How do I care about someone that I don't even know, that's not my friend, that's not my family? How do I care about someone other than me? And the reality is, I mean, even from a selfish perspective, it's very short-sighted of us to not care about this issue. Because the reality is, right now, you guys, we are making the world that you're going to live in. Both on the outside and the systems and the stuff like that, but also on the inside. I've told this story a bunch because it really strikes me. I was in 7th grade. I was your guys' age during the Rodney King riots. And so was my generation. That's where we were. And this is the world that we made because of that. Because we said, wow, that's really crazy, but does it really affect me? No. And inside, we didn't do the work. Inside, we didn't change. We just hoped it would fade away. And or that thing of like, well, in a couple of generations, it will just go away. And that's horrible for the people that are dying, for the people that are suffering, that we're just not going to care. And not only that, I mean, like, that's not who Jesus calls us to be. That's not who we claim to be by saying that we follow Jesus. Jesus did not ignore the cries of people. One of my favorite passages from the Bible is from the Old Testament, is that when God is talking to Moses through the burning bush, right? Exodus, he said, God says, I have heard the cries of my people, and I have come down to rescue them. God cares about the cries of his people, and he calls us to do that too. So then it comes that last step, which is the labor aspect. And this is why, especially those first two, are so important, because it's so important not to be fake. Because I think a lot of you guys have talked about this, seeing on social media and on Twitter and on Instagram and everything. Like, people posting stuff just because it's hip. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Like, aren't I cool? And you don't want to do that. That's offensive to them. That doesn't mean that you can't really mean it. That doesn't mean that you can't really care. Because, and this might not mean a lot to you guys right now. It should. I really hope it does. Is that historically, and I don't even mean like your grandchildren. I mean like a couple of years from now, when you're in high school, people are going to ask you like, hey, what did you like? Wow, that was amazing that you were around back then in the civil rights movement. Like, what'd you do? And I don't know about you. I don't want to say like, well, I didn't do anything. Like, I just ignored it. Like, and especially down the road. Imagine what it's going to be like, when kids that don't know, when you're, 10, 12 years from now, and kids are coming up who don't know what's going on. When my son, AJ doesn't know what's going on right now. When he talks to you guys, when he's a sixth grader, and you guys are in college, and he says, wow, you guys were around during the civil rights movement? Like, what was that like? Yeah, I don't want to say, well, son, I didn't do anything. I just ignored it. And then what can we do? What can we do to stand up to what's happening right now? The first and the biggest one is what is the big buzzword right now, and that's being not just not being racist, but being anti-racist. How can I actually be pro or anti-racism, not a racist myself? And that's being that person who's going to stand up and say, hey, this is not okay. And I don't necessarily mean like you see a police officer doing something inappropriate and you stand up and like, I don't necessarily mean that. But I mean like, dude, I was in middle school. I know that we saw it as funny to make an inappropriate joke every now and again. We saw it as funny to do like, or not only that, maybe sometimes we would get so upset at somebody that we just wanted to like lash out. And so we found the ugliest word we could and we threw it out there. To be that person who's going to say, like, you know what? That's not okay in any situation. And don't get me wrong, that is not a popular position to be in. And being someone who's actually going to tell people like that might get you, unfriended. And that's tough. Social media is another one that, like, I don't know. That's a tough one. You guys know your social media world better than I do. Some of you are not on Instagram or anything like that. Some of you guys are hardcore TikTok people. You at least have a platform. And again, there's a lot of fakeness going on. And don't get me wrong, if you post something that you really believe in, somebody might think you're fake. That might be a risk. But if you think that this is something that people might listen to, or not only that, if you think this is a way for you to stand up, that's out there. The protests, like, I kind of want to encourage you guys, if you've done the learning and the listening and stuff like that, and you're curious, like, it might be great to check one out. I mean, if you're not sure that you believe in what they believe in, like, marching is not appropriate, but you can certainly go and check it out. Like, if you still have in your mind that I think all of these people are mean and violent, go see one, go watch it to see what's happening there. I mean, I've been to one and that's not at all what I saw. And then the last one, the most important one, is that internal stuff. Is those three things that we talked about. You got to look at that first. And you got to turn that over to the Holy Spirit to be able to say, like, hey, God, like, I've got to clean this up. So I want to leave us with the end of the story. And that's the reason that we're doing all of this is the book of Revelation ends, chapter 7, so it's not the end, has this passage, which I love. So John says, and if you guys don't know the book of Revelation, John is having a vision, a dream, basically, that God gives him to inspire him. Here's the end of the story, John, so that you know I got this. And this is the vision that John sees in chapter 7. After this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and holding palm branches in their hand, and they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Every nation, tribe, people, and language. We're all going to be there. We're all going to be standing there before the Lamb. It really isn't going to matter who's black and who's white and who's like, we're all going to be united following Christ. But this is not where we are right now. And if we believe in that, if we believe in God's plan, like, I think we have to want that. And I think we have to be willing to work towards it. Let me pray for us, and then if you guys want to jump on Zoom, we can hang out for a little bit. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for your word and the comfort that it brings. I pray that, we would be able to wrestle with these things and to let you do your work inside of us and help us to be more the people that you see us being. Help us to see the role that you want us to play in what's happening right now and the kind of people that you want us to be. Give us the strength, give us the courage, give us the eyes to see, the wisdom, and the hearts to listen, to hear. Thank you. We love you, and in Jesus' name, amen.